Hey everyone, it's Rob, and thanks for listening in today. As always, I greatly appreciate your time. My guest today is Ryan Tansom, and I'm so excited to have Ryan on as I have become a huge fan of the work that he and his partner, and happens to be imageOne's Fractional CFO, Pat Hobby, do at their company, the one they started, which is called Arkona. Their services has helped me to see and execute on my business with intentionality. I've had a few really impactful tools for my business over the last 31 years. Things like the Entrepreneur Operating System, or EOS, the Small Giants community, the Great Game of Business, or Open Book Finance, financial literacy, the 2-second lean process. And now I consider Arkona's intentional growth framework as part of that group, which is why I so badly wanted to share it with my audience. Now, a little bit about Ryan. He started his entrepreneurial career at his family business, where he was the executive vice president and responsible for the strategic, operational, and financial strategy of the $21 million company. Coincidentally, in the same industry as one of my businesses is in, imageOne. Now, Ryan helped to turn the company around and bring intentional focus to the right strategies, which enabled it to be sold for 8 figures to a local competitor back in 2014. He then took this experience and he founded Arkona to create the intentional growth framework, which helps owners grow the value of their company with the end in mind through educational training, fractional CFO services, and strategic planning. Now, Ryan also hosts a really excellent podcast, and I highly recommend it. It's called the Intentional Growth Podcast, and he's recorded 280 plus episodes. It's had over 380,000 downloads, and he's had guests on such as Todd Herman, Bo Burlingham, Jack Stack, Gino Wickman, Dan Martell, and Alan Bailu, and I probably said that wrong, but I'm sure that that's a great episode to listen to. In any event, as I've mentioned, this will be the 3rd time I mention it, I am so excited to have Ryan on. I am such a believer in the intentional growth framework. It has really shifted my mindset, and it just might shift yours as well. So please enjoy my conversation with Ryan. Ryan, welcome to the pod. I'm so excited to chat with you. I've been dying to talk to you. So this is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Rob. I'm very excited to be on the other side of the quote unquote table.
I know. And I've been wondering about that. How many podcasts do you do? Or is that not, because you have your own podcast, which I talk about in the intro, so people have already heard about it. But how many so you're interviewing people all the time. How often are the tables turned on you?
Started doing that in like February, Rob. So probably like 24 maybe in the last like 5 months or so. It's a totally different art, man, or lack of. You can judge of whether I'm okay on this side.
I think it's easier to ask the questions, I got to tell you.
I would agree, man. Because I'm like, wait a second, what are my guardrails here?
Exactly. Well, I always like to start with a quote. So here's what I got for you. It goes like this: pain plus reflection equals progress. And I actually was curious. Usually I'll say who said the quote, but I'm curious if you know who it was. I'm going to start there.
Oh my gosh. Pain plus
reflection equals progress.
Is it one of the Roosevelts?
No, but when I tell you, you're going to go, it's Ray Dalio.
Oh, now I feel terrible.
I told you how you would react. So anyway, thinking about this, pain plus reflection equals progress. What are your thoughts on that?
If you just keep going and you don't know why you're experiencing the pain, I think that's where a lot of people like get into the turmoil inside of their head of like, why are you doing what you're doing? I think so many people ask that question and then they just kind of just keep going to the default mode of what they're doing. And it just truly takes the time to reflect, to go, am I on track or not? And I just have, I think that clarity is, there's so much underneath. There's so much behind that clarity.
Yeah, it's so true. You always ask your guests a question, I think at the end. So it's only makes sense that I ask you, but I'm going to ask you at the beginning. And the question that you always ask, and I hopefully I'll do it justice, but is what does intentional mean to you? Isn't that what you ask?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
what does it mean to you?
For me, it's having a purpose, having a clear point B or a clear set of circumstances that you want to see yourself participating into a point in the future, and you have deliberate and purposeful action that you're marching towards on the way there, and it allows you to understand the trade-offs that you're making. So you actually have a decision-making framework, because if you don't, kind of going back to your point, if you don't know where you're going, how are you making the decisions to get there? And so I think it's really identifying some point in the future and some sort of multi-dimensional set of things that you want, and then working on purpose with your time, money, energy, and all the things to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And allowing you to say, you and I and Gino and the 10 disciplines of like, hey, say no. And how do you say no if you don't know what you're trying to do?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I feel like I didn't hear a lot about intentionality in business. And maybe you're somebody who brought it to the forefront for me a couple of years ago. But what kind of brought this to you? How did this come to you, and this idea of being more intentional?
I do not. I get huge anxiety of not knowing where I'm at in the world and how I fit, just as an individual. And so like, I think about like, again, I wake up, I got a lot of stuff on my mind. I got the monkey brain, man. That's why you and I like meditating, and it shuts it off. But it's like, how are you deciding how to funnel all of that infinite potential of the whole world that anybody could pretty much in today's world, given certain, access to opportunities, but like, how do you make your choices? And I didn't know how to make choices. And so it was like, okay, well, why am I doing this? And so like, I think that the big inflection point specifically for me, it manifests itself when we sold the business, because that's a big decision that has long lasting implications on your life. And there's other circumstances, divorce or whatever the, different inflection points that people have. How are you going to make that huge decision? I don't want to do it in the, in my gut instinct on the fly, because I'm good at making decisions, but I don't know what the ripple effect, like the second, third, fourth order effect of that is. It gives me huge anxiety. So like understanding how all of that works and saying, okay, well, I want to go here. I don't know if it's the exact point B that I want, but like I at least have the everything kind of get my perception synthesizes everything that I'm going to have to do to get there. And it just makes me less anxious and stressed, and gives me a clear path of what to do.
So you were part of a family business, and it was a $21 million company. And were you all intentional about the sale when you did that? And just for the listeners, Ryan and I found out later after we met that his business, which he sold, happens to be in the same industry as the business that I still own, called imageOne in the Detroit area. And I've been a co-owner of that company for 31 years now. So that was something that we connected on. But were you intentional about the sale?
The answer is no, but I want to go back and say we both have toner running through our blood is a different way of saying that. But all joking aside, no, Rob, we weren't. So everything that I do now is because of that inflection point. And so many of us entrepreneurs wake up and we're just doing things, we're chasing an idea, but like, again, a lot of these, like our destinations are multidimensional. And I don't think a lot of people think like that. They silo things, compartmentalize things, and realize that like we all have 168 hours each week. That's it. So everything that we're doing each week is either getting us closer to our goals or further away. So whether we like it or not. And so we realized after that, there's no take backs, by the way. I mean, well, I shouldn't be saying that to you, because you actually,
that is true.
You're the one person I could say you bought your company back again. But generally speaking, big decisions like that are hard to come back from.
Yeah.
And so I realized, there was other, call it regrets. I don't like the word regrets, but things that you wish you would have known, you would have had different decision making criteria. It's just, that's really what I think, going back to one of your earlier questions of like where it kind of really set in stone of for me is like, I'd really like to know how everything I'm doing is impacting the future Ryan.
I want to share that I've learned a lot from you. And I want to go back to the beginning. And I share this story with the audience because I think there's a couple lessons that and nuggets of wisdom that people can pull away from this. But the first is how you engaged with me. And I remember you once sending me a video, and you talked about the podcast and things of that nature. And I found it really authentic, and I really appreciated that about you. And things didn't go the way at the time that the requests that you had made, but nonetheless, you really stuck in my mind and in my heart. And we later got, more engaged in different ways. And now I like to say that, I look at the services that you guys offer as a foundational tool in my
Oh, that's
business
awesome.
toolbox. And so talk about Arkona and, describe to the audience what you do. And then once you all hear this, you'll understand what it's done for me.
Oh, that's very kind of you, Rob. And so our business right now, Arkona, has a methodology we call the intentional growth framework. And it's got 4 phases, and it's learn, plan, grow, choose. And it's just kind of this journey. We're all on a journey. And there's 2 lines of services that we have within that. It just kind of, that journey just maps it out. But the first line of business is a training, educational service offering, which has got 5 principles, and we call it the intentional growth training. And then that follows up that after that training is fractional CFO services, where we integrate into someone's company as if we're permanent. So each of our CFOs is like 4 or 5 clients, and that's it. It's not like the lower level material or lower level like bookkeeping, payroll stuff. So it's really that financial guide. But I think that one of the things that you're highlighting is these 5 principles of intentional growth. And the first, and they go in order, and it really, the result of these, and I'll explain what they are in a little bit more detail, but what the result is at the end, you have more clarity in that point B and the multidimensional nature of it and what it's going to take to get there. So you have a better understanding of, what do I want? What are the financial implications of it? What are the personal implications of it? What are the realistic timelines and the things that are going to needed to be done to get me to where I want to go? So there's kind of like this set of reality, instead of just, how many times have you met entrepreneurs, me being one of them, of like, someday, somewhere, my vision will become reality. And you're just kind of just chasing it like a dog with a car. This is about kind of just laying the foundation, say, here's how the whole thing works. And so the 5 principles, the first one is your drivers, your and I's dear friend, Bo Burlingham. Who are you? What do you want from the business, and why? And think about it. Family, legacy. Are you enjoying something as your role? Is it disrupting an industry? Whatever it is, it's okay. But identifying that. The second principle are your financial targets. And there's 3 of them. What's the annual income you want for life? What's your net worth outside of the business? And really what those first 2 do is tee up then the value of the company. So you can treat your company as a financial asset, because in America, owning a business, you have complete control over growing the value of that company. The third principle is your exit options. It's not about selling the business, but if you don't know how the journey can unfold at the end, you're just kind of hoping and praying. And so we break them down into 5 different exit buckets, and how to monetize the business: internal transfers, external ones being third parties, ESOPs, private equity firms as a financial buyer, and then what we call search funds or acquisition entrepreneurs. They're all going to impact the valuation, what they're going to want to do with the business, and then how your role is pre and post closing, and how much money you get down versus over time. So essentially there's implications of it. So what do you want from the business and why? Financial targets, your exit options. And when you round that third principle, Rob, people go, okay, I actually get how all of this stuff works now. Now, what do I do about it? And so the 4th principle is, how do we increase the value of the business? So it's increased value by de-risking the cash flow. And the 5th one is your team of advisors, and you make sure the advisors around you, just like in EOS with with the accountability chart, GWC, same thing with your advisors. And all this does, Rob, is say like, hey, like, we didn't invent any of this, man. Like, it's just organizing it in a way that hopefully makes sense. So that way you can sit down at the end of this and say, okay, I have a pretty good understanding what my point B is for my, my personal drivers, the financial targets I want. Now I'm going to grow the value of the company to a point in time that's going to give me the options to do what I want at some point in time in the future.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, for EOS, GWC is get it, want it, capacity to do it. And, I'll share a little bit about my story because this can almost sound like a commercial, but I promise you, I wanted to have Ryan on because anytime I'm excited about something like I am with EOS and the great game of business and Small Giants and these other, resources that have been so impactful, I just am compelled to share. And I want to be clear about everyone understanding what Arkona does and then share a little bit about what it's done for us because we were a pretty mature business when we engaged with you. And I have a business partner, we're 50-50, and we went through this educational component. I think that's the learn part. Is that right?
Yep.
And, there was a really thoughtful exercise that we went through. And then we spent some time with Pat, your business partner, one of your business partners, and yourself. And, we got to lay out in more clarity. And we'd done things like this in the past, but this was as clear as it ever got, what our hopes and dreams were for the future, even though we have a very clear vision written and shared with our entire team. But this had to do with personally. And it really brought a ton of clarity to the two of us. And, Ryan's been witness to the changes that we very quickly made within the business. One of the most impactful things was to put in place a CEO who we felt would get us to our vision better than the two of us could. And that was a super impactful decision. I don't know that we would have made that or even thought about it had it not been going through this exercise. And of course, Pat now works as our fractional CFO, which has been an amazing thing that happened for us as well. Because the fractional CFO services makes a ton more sense for us than a full-time CFO. So, that's just for the audience.
Well, and I was just if you can, because I appreciate that, Rob, and I didn't even know that this is going to be that much focus on this, and I appreciate because this is just education, right? Like the one thing I like to say about people about what we're doing to people is like, again, we didn't invent any of this. This is how the world works. Like, you know what I mean? I didn't invent some of we call them the 5 principles, but there's this very specific way ESOPs work. There's a very specific way valuations work. There's a very, you know what I mean? Like we just organize in a way to hopefully accelerate that clarity, like you talked about. And I remember when you and I and Pat and your business partner were sitting in Joel, I didn't know if you wanted to, if you said his name, but yeah, Joel, you guys were like, I mean, you guys have been business partners since you were in college together. And you were like, wait, you want that? Wait, you want that? I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful, because the reality is you guys both share a financial asset that kicks off cash and that's worth something. And if you guys don't know what you want for your roles or for long-term, I mean, it's going to impact, should we reinvest in the business or should we not? Should we hire a CEO or should we not? Should we, it's going to impact every single business decision. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying about what's your point B? If you don't have that clear, what criteria are people making for those decisions? And I think that's where a lot of the anxiety comes from when you're running a business. You're making decisions that have a big impact long-term, but you don't know what the ripple effect is. Yeah,
that's so true. I think for the two of us, the heightened sense of reality of the fact that our business is our biggest asset, that was a big shift for us to say, well, now why would two people who aren't as capable of taking it to the vision be running the company? It's the most important asset we have. We should have somebody more capable in place to do that. And it almost made the decision. So it did. It actually made it so much easier. Okay. So I wanted to ask you this question that I like to ask this from time to time of the guests, but it's so perfect for the conversation we're having. And that is, what is your relationship with money?
Oh, wow. So we have 45 minutes left or something. I'll joking aside, it's changed a lot, Rob. And I think that's a lot to do with the story I told about selling the business and then what I'm doing now. And it is crazy, dude. Like, when we had the business, so I won't go into the major details, but we had this really terrible set of financing. The business, you and I both know it's a good business, man. Like the maintenance agree, it's a service business that's got very good profit margins. we were incorrectly financed, and what that did, and when it was exacerbated with the financial crisis, I mean, I was juggling well into the healthy six-figure salary or six-figure payroll every 2 weeks. Barely ever made it, man. I never missed it with my dad, and so it was always scarcity. Even though my dad, I grew up in kind of the poorer part of the growing of the company. My siblings kind of got more of the, hey, that we actually can afford to do things. So I was in the stage of business where I grew up. It was kind of like, hey, it was always going towards the business. And then when the material stuff started to manifest itself, it was kind of like, oh, well, this is deserved, even though we might not be able to do this right now. We should, we kind of got to reward ourselves. But when I got into the company, Rob, there was such a scarcity of capital. And now in the finance term, working capital and the ability to reinvest and how that impacts distributions and all these things. I didn't know all those things. It was just like, how can we afford growth? How can we afford our payroll? It was just always, how can we? And never understanding it. And so I always had, I never had the leverage. Leverage is a bad word, but like the ability to say no to a bad client, or to a bad hire, or to fire the sales rep. It was always just like I was kind of forced to make decisions to keep things that, like, just for the money's sake. You sell, and then all of a sudden you're now liquid. I didn't make as much money as my dad. I mean, I essentially made a commission investment banker fee out of it because it was his business. The challenge was, Rob, then I kind of went back in and I made a big decision to just quit after 60 days and start my own thing. So I went back into scarcity. And so there was it's a long answer, but a lot of times it was scarcity and it wasn't as abundant as it should have been. And so now if I were to tell you, because I have geeked out and learned more about money in the last 8 months or 8 years, I should say, that out of this fear. So like macroeconomics, monetary policy. I mean, I have my Series 65. I mean, now I talk about valuations with companies. So I had to essentially master my understanding of money to realize that money is just a way of people expressing what they're doing. And now I get on my podcast, I have people that are billionaires that I've interviewed, and it doesn't even bother me one bit. And it's like a weird personal transition of like going from scared of it to now I don't even have 1 ounce of jealousy of someone else that could be worth $100 million because they made a set of decisions along their life that got them to where they are. And like, I've designed my own life where I want what I want and I don't want someone else's life. And so like, it's now just money as a means to accomplish the things that I want instead of trying to figure out how to keep things together. I don't know if that's a long answer. So I haven't been asked that. So that was a very interesting question.
It's something I'm fascinated about because I think money is so complicated. I asked somebody who knew you if they knew what your relationship with money was, and they said complicated. But I think that's the answer for many people. And so something I'm curious about is in your work with your clients, what are you noticing about their relationship with money?
I think when people understand how it works, the complication goes away, Rob. And that's like, mine used to be complicated, but like I watch everybody, like I watch people every single day. Like they have money, but where is it? Is it in your checking account? Is it working capital? Is it in your wealth fund? Like what does it mean? But really all it is buying power for you to do things that you want. Right. I mean, that's really it. But if you don't understand how it manifests itself and where it is and how it works, then it's just a surprise when you have it and you don't know what to do with it or how to project what that could be into the future, whether it's the value of your company, commercial real estate, or your, investment funds and your ETF, allocated pie chart and Schwab account, or if it's, but money is just a value of exchange between two people and it's buying power. And it's a way to get to where you want to go. But if you don't understand how it accumulates and then how that goes into then your ability to deploy it, then it is complicated. But if you actually understand it, which is why you brought up Ray Dalio, and I laugh because his Changing World Order, it explains money to the nth degree. But like, I think that the clients that we have, Rob, are the same way. Like once they understand the 3 financial statements and understand it's not just gross profit, like there's a lot of stuff inside the 3 financial statements. And once people understand it, they're like, it's not that confusing of when I should invest versus pay my taxes versus distributions. And I want to take this a step further is typical entrepreneurs, everybody hates taxes for the most part, right? Like oh, I have to give it after this, but you know what? I have to give it everything up after I work so hard. You know what I realized, Rob? When people have that clarity into the future, and it's like, dude, let's say taxes were 75%. I mean, dramatic. I don't want that. No one wants that. But if you can see into the future, your business, how you can accumulate distributions, how you can afford that 75% of taxes while funding your company. I mean, it sucks, but it's not detrimental. I mean, you can still navigate it. You can still build a business. I mean, so I watch people weirdly enough go, well, yeah, I'm just taking I'm disgruntled about putting those taxes each month into that, tax checking account, but I'm not as pissed off of ending up at the end of the year with $1 million tax bill and no cash, which is so unique. So I think, again, it's back to understanding it and watching that anxiety go down once people understand it.
One of the things I actually want to go a level deeper with that question, because, one of the things I think about that oftentimes drives behavior for entrepreneurs, in my experience, over the years, is things like, and I'm going to use maybe a couple funny examples, but some people, they'll spend $1,000 on this, but they won't spend $5 on that. They'll hem and haw about the $5, but $1,000 they won't even blink an eye. That's the kind of emotional decision making that we have in our lives as it relates to money. I think in business, things like, I'm a big, and our listeners would know, I'm very much in favor of financial literacy and opening up your books. Others feel very uncomfortable with that. And to me, that is just not good or bad, but it's just that person's relationship with money. Maybe they're a little bit more private about it, or maybe they feel a certain emotion when others see X, Y, or Z numbers. And what I'm really interested in trying to figure out is how our mind works around this idea of money. And when we can let go of all these things that drive these kind of funny decisions that we all make around money, how that frees us up to live a happier life. What are your thoughts on that?
Amen, man. Like I think there's a truth to, you've got your perspective on financial literacy and open book management versus someone else. I think it's pretty universal, man. The financial literacy on personal finance or business finance is so darn low right now. The reason, we just got off a 12-year bull run where everything just went up, cheap money and everything went up. Well, you don't have to plan that hard when everything's going up. Inflation, supply chain issues, and then you got, industries that are going all over the place. The waters are choppy right now. If you don't understand how this stuff works, my God, the stress that comes with that versus saying, hey, by the way, I still got my compass. I still got my map. I still know how this works. I know how to steer the ship and navigate through the waters like that. Your 3 financial statements that's it, man. I didn't make them up. Apple has 3 financial statements: income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. The dry cleaner down the road that's doing 500 grand has 3 financial statements, period. End the story. And Jack Stack, your nice friend too, he was on my show and he's like, you want KPIs, build your income statement the right way.
That's right.
And so I think, was it him, Rob, that gave the example of they took if you're doing 20 million in revenue, they kind of took and departmentalized the monopoly money to say
yeah,
by the way, the owners aren't making 20 million bucks, technician right. A or B. And so I just watch people's anxiety go down, that's collaboration right. go up, and he calls it the great game of business because it's a game. And so I don't know if that's directly answering the question, but I have such a belief in financial literacy. And dude, right now around around my house in Minnesota, there are 7 different neighborhoods with 500 houses going up that are all 750 plus. And I just run the numbers. I'm like, there's not that many people in Minnesota that can afford 750. And how much can I borrow today? And what is it? The Ivy League schools, only one of them just introduced financial literacy for the first time ever. I don't know. I just think it's a challenge because we're all seeing what everybody else is doing, but we're not seeing how they're actually getting that accomplished or not, and whether it's in a good way or in a bad way. So we all fill the void with just assumptions, I guess.
Yeah. Now, you talked about learning all this stuff about money and kind of, you're a voracious reader. and you retain a lot. I've learned that about you. It's quite amazing. I think for those that are watching this on YouTube, that he's got a bunch of books behind him on a bookshelf. I think you've read all those books, if I'm not mistaken. You told me that.
Yeah, and I quit
There's a
buying
lot
the
of books back
audiobooks.
there, everyone. Just most people aren't probably watching on YouTube, so just suffice it to say, there's a lot of books back there.
Probably been like 250 or 300 books in the last 6 years is what I counted.
So what's one or two money books that you think are the most impactful for somebody to read?
Oh, that's a tough one for me to answer right off the bat, because I ended up getting my Series 65, my investment license, after we sold, as a way of instead of a book, I got a certification, which don't do that unless you wanted to be a money manager for some reason. But I mean, it's a meaty, heavy lift, but changing world order, it starts with, by the way, like money is literally like, Rob, if you and I were sitting, if the whole world disappeared and we're sitting in the jungle, like this whole bartering thing is completely debunked. There's a book called Debt that's maybe worth looking into, but like, it's just like, if I wanted to sell you my phone, you wanted to validate, like, how do we identify the price of this phone? And then you need to trust that I'm going to give you something in value of exchange. I mean, we're just exchanging trust, Rob, is all it is. So Ray's book, I mean, it takes you from that kind of concept to, by the way, here's how international monetary policy works. So not for everybody, but I'm trying to think if there's any other like financial ones. That Debt in the 20th century, I think, is an interesting one. Trying to think. I don't know. It's
okay. Changing World Order and Debt in the 20th century.
I think that's what it is called. Yep.
Okay. I understand that you are fascinated about how the mind works. And I'm curious, with that fascination in mind, what's one or two things that you've learned about this subject for yourself?
Everybody needs a purpose. We are human beings, and unless we are striving towards something, it doesn't work. You will be unbelievably unhappy if you're not striving towards something. And there's this concept, there's a lot of books around this, but it's this concept, and clinical psychologists will refer to it as, like, I mean, you got this point B, and we've talked about the business, so you can see there's a lot of themes here, but like, what is it that we're going towards? And then we're learning about who we are along the way. And just a very basic example, Rob, there's this book, Conversations with God, that I really like. And it's amazing, man. And like, love and fear, those are the only two things. That's it. And so if you like, I mean, in the world of AI and how much we're talking about AI and the decisions, like almost like in the next 5 years, I swear most of these big decisions we're going to have to make are all moral decisions, because AI, if it can do anything, it has all the resources and all the power in the whole world, and you would solve every problem. You would essentially just go all the way into love. Like, you would literally just create this utopia that's perfect, but then you don't even know you're in it because you have no relativity. So you have to have the opposite so you can understand yourself. And then, like, the whole life journey is literally about understanding more about who you are. So you have to enjoy that journey. And that's the whole point. But if there's no point B and you're just waking up and sitting there, that's not what we're supposed to be. So like, a lot of the concepts of clinical psychology, or any of like the more progressive stuff on the fray these days, like, it's all about trying to figure out who we are and what journey we're on. And I just think that once you understand that the reason that the fear is there in free will is because if it wasn't free will, we wouldn't learn about ourselves. And one last point on that, man, like, to prove it to myself, like, what I came up with, or I heard this story is, what do we do to punish the worst human beings on the planet that are in jail, not death penalty, but the worst human beings in the worst jail? What do we do to punish them?
What do we do to punish them? I
didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. It's a good question. I have to think about this.
So think about the maximum security prison, worst human beings on the planet, and we're going to punish them. One of them,
you put them in solitary confinement, I guess.
Yep.
Is the worst thing that happens, is usually what they say.
You nailed it. So we take the worst person and we take them away from killers and rapists and all this stuff. We take them away from the worst people to put them by themselves because it's a bigger punishment. Because we need human interaction to learn about ourselves. Without relativity, we have nothing. So like the whole point is we wake up and we're experiencing ourselves, and then we have to look up and come up with a noble aim for something to strive for, and then enjoy the journey and enjoy the pain.
It's great. On this topic, aside from Conversations with God, which I think was very impactful for you, was there another book, documentary, podcast, or something that, really stuck out for you?
There's a lot of talk about the hero's journey these days.
Yeah.
And
Joseph Campbell.
Well, that's one. Donald Miller, Story Brand, or whatever it might be. There's a person, that's a character. They have some problems. They meet a guide. They make a plan, and then they have success. So it's this is what we've been doing as human beings forever. So like the hero's journey is everywhere, and everybody's always trying to do something. And so I think there's that concept is you can see it almost everywhere. And when you start to realize that there's this pursuit of something good, because if you don't want to pursue something good, like what's the alternative? The alternative sucks. It's nihilism. It's nothing. You think what's the purpose here? And I can tell you that that's not going to be a good alternative. And I'd say more than a book, Rob, it's my family. We have had a lot of mental health issues in like immediate family, different parts of the extended family. It's so painful watching people's chaos. And it's because it's directionless. Anxiety comes from it. Depression comes from it. OCD, eating disorders, alcoholism. It's a lot of this issues where I watch when people end up realizing life is worth living and it's worth striving towards something noble. And that's just personal, like witnessing of my family and various of those things. And that's a lot of the stuff we're talking about, whether it's money or the mind or any of this is I focus on this stuff because I don't want to be crazy. I want to enjoy this while we're here. And I'm scared of the alternative of watching what happens if you don't work on the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for sharing that about your family. I mean, I think many of us have similar family dynamics, family members, friends. Thank goodness mental health is an easier thing to talk about these days. I know
pick up your boots and pants, man.
Those days hopefully have passed to a certain extent.
Yeah, right.
But I want to talk about one of the services that we use, which is Fractional CFO services. And why is it useful for a company? At what point is it justifiable to bring in a fractional CFO? Especially if, say, they have like a controller in place.
Yep, that's a good question, loaded question. I'm trying to think of the best way to not go off on too many tangents. So guide me if you will. So the CFO looks at the business as a financial asset. So I want to unpack just kind of the roles, and then we'll talk about the fractional nature of it. So like the role of a CFO, I mean, I was running a $20 million business. We went through 4 CFOs, and I now know they were not CFOs, period. So the hierarchy of the finance function is CFO, controller, bookkeeper, like staff accountant doing AP, AR, and bank recs and all that stuff. The CFO is someone that understands operations and a vision and the financial implications of that on cash flow today and the future value of the company, period. If they don't understand that stuff, they're not a CFO. I mean, the general going market rate, and you can look this up online, but like the market comp of a CFO of a privately held company is $302,000, probably, cash bonuses and equity. I know a lot of entrepreneurs that are trying to strive to make that themselves. So like, I always just really say like, and a CFO is usually overseeing HR, potentially HR, all the finance function, taking the strategic plan and rolling it into all 3 financial statements, not just the income statement, but they understand the interplay between the 3 financial statements, the impact on cash, distributions, working capital, and the future value of the company. And then it's sitting down with the crazy people like you and me and going, I have an idea. Okay. What's the cost of that idea? And what's the impact on cash today? And what's the impact on the future value of the company? If you can't answer that, they're not a CFO, in my opinion. And if you look at the salary, then I'm like, given a couple of the things I just said, and then you take the salary, if you're paying someone 125 grand, they're not a CFO. I mean, they might be, but you might have found like a charitable CFO that's on the second half of their career. But like people are like, well, I got a CFO and I pay him 100 grand. I'm like, I hate to say it, but you don't. I mean, like unless there's a lot of questions that can be answered that make sense. Controllers is a job that, call it 90 to 120 grand. Their job is to produce timely, accurate, and useful monthly financials. Here you go. It's all the boxes are where they need to go. And that's it. You're not getting forward guidance. You're not like the strategic nature, all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of the landscape. Hopefully that helps. And then the CPA, by the way, just takes numbers and boxes and understands the tax implications of your decisions. And you're doing a lot of, maybe some adjustments at the end of the year. The fractional nature, Rob, it's like so crazy. I'm a context guy, so I can't do it without context. Like, so there's 27 million privately held companies in the US. Only 6 million of them have employees. There are over 100 million in revenue. There's only 20,000 companies that are privately held, and they employ like 60 million Americans. And then between 5 million in revenue and 100 million in revenue, there's 350,000 privately held companies. That's it. And they employ about 30 million Americans. Then below 5 million, it's 5.6 million companies. So if you think about the insane probability of getting up over 5 million, I mean, you're in the 4% about. And so my point about this, if you're a $5 million company and you're in the 95 percentile, 5 million in revenue, let's say you're doing 10% in EBITDA, that's 500 grand. Like you're not paying a CFO $300,000, man. Like you're hoping to make 200 maybe, and the value of the company might be a couple $1 million, taxes and debt. I mean, like it's a problem, man. So like the challenge is the way to scale your business and understand how to scale your business. You need that financial roadmap to understand the financial implications of your ideas and how you're going to scale that without going bankrupt. So like everyone needs that mind sitting next to them, but they just can't afford it. And a $5 million business or even a $20 million business doesn't need a $300,000 powered mind, because they're doing mergers and acquisitions and rolling out models on product and product launches or comp plans. I mean, like very sophisticated ideas. You need that all the time, but you don't need, or you need that mind, but you don't need it all the time. Right. So it's kind of like this time demand plus like your business and your affordability. So like, a fractional CFO for us, I mean, call it between 5 and 7 grand a month, give or take. And these are, hourly rates, but I just think people always go, well, I don't need that yet. And it's like, well, would you build a building without a blueprint? Let's like, get the walls up and then we'll figure out where we want, everything to go.
Well, now let me do my own experience on this. So we have a very clear vision, as you know. It guides us to 2026. Pat came in as our fractional CFO. And for the first time, we started by building out what we call the path. So we have a financial path to get us to 2026. And he challenged us to explain and to create how we would execute on that. What was the plan going to be? How many salespeople would we need, for example? And so we went through this exercise and we realized we actually came up short based on how we built it out. So we said, well, how do we bridge the gap? Well, we could do acquisitions, but we'd never done acquisitions before. So we said, we need to do acquisitions. That's the only way we're going to bridge the gap. So we included that in our path, our plan to 2026. And I felt doing acquisitions was not something we were going to do well without somebody like Pat, like a good, solid CFO who could guide us through the financial aspects of every aspect of making that acquisition, from, vetting it out, due diligence to close.
From an idea to like reality.
That's right. That's right. And so, and I'm happy to say we made one. We closed on one last year. We have a strong pipeline right now. And I wouldn't have felt as confident about doing that, had we not had somebody in place like that. But again, he's fractional. We're about a $20 million company, and all the things that you said. We don't need a full-time $300,000
Oh,
CFO. So
well,
there's such power in how you can grow your business with a fractional in place. So that's my experience
I
for everybody.
appreciate that, Rob. And I want to thread together a couple of the themes we've been talking about, because I'm a visionary, and like, not knowing how your ideas are going to come into fruition is extremely frustrating, anxiety driven. And by the way, you want to talk about burnout? Well, it's just like, keep going, keep going, keep going, because I never know when I'm going to be there. And so it's just this like you're just dealing with ambiguity all the time.
Yeah.
Where are the rubber hits the road with this? You mentioned a little bit about the salespeople. Let's take that a step further though, because like, everybody thinks about, because it's taking money and your vision of your life, and you're combining that in your business, you're combining them together with your business, because your business is the vehicle traditionally to get you outsized options and returns.
Right.
Your budgeting process, it's not just take last year's budget, add 5%, divide by 12, because those salespeople you're going to hire, you might not hire them all today. You're going to say, when can I afford them? What are the assumptions? I don't know this about your business, but I know your business because I had the same one. Is a salesperson, let's say you pay them 50 to 80 grand, takes them 18 months to ramp up. They're not selling 50 grand a gear month one at 40% margins. Like, so you're mapping out reality.
Yeah.
Like in detail for the 12-month budget. So month by month by month, what are you going to do for sales? What's the cost of goods going to be for that, and the right margins so you can get to your net income? And then you're tying in the balance sheet and the cash flow statement so you can see the implication, the impact on cash of your idea. And by the way, for me, I don't know what it did for you, Rob, but like when we did it for Arkona, I mean, I was like living under like just go for like 8 years, and we did it. And it was just like, well, this is nice because I just have to wake up and execute. I don't have to wonder if what I'm executing on is the right things. That's right. If that makes sense.
It brought me clarity and confidence. And I think when I have clarity and confidence, I'm all in. Like, I can go out there and make stuff happen. When I'm confused, I don't move at the same speed because I'm hesitant. And so clarity and confidence was key for me.
Rob, does it bring you also the ability to then take the time off without anxiety too, because you know that you're on track or off track? I'm curious on how that does for your off time. I mean,
too. I think for me, so just using my own personal experience, that I felt like we had a great controller in place. So, I felt good about the business operations day to day. What I would lose sleep over about is our vision. Are we on the right track to our vision? Are we doing the right things? But I could still take time off. I could still, get away and recharge. So that wasn't my personal problem, but I can imagine it could be for many.
Got it.
Okay. I just want to shift to a little bit about your podcast. And I'm just curious, I'm also a big fan of your podcast. It's on my list of ones that I, come up, and I only have a few. So I
made the list.
You made the list. I don't know if that's special.
What's Pat paying you to listen? No, I'm just kidding.
No, I've really learned a lot from the guests. So I love your podcast. And one of my favorite podcasts is Tim Ferriss, and he's pretty well known. And so, just to contrast, the size, because it's different. Obviously, you've had great success, but he's in a league of his own. But I really do enjoy the guests that you have. Some are well-known people, some aren't as well-known, but I'm curious, who is one of your favorite guests? What's one that really stuck out for you? If somebody were to go listen to it and you'd say, look, I don't know anything about you, so if you have to pick one, you got to go listen to this one.
I'm trying not to flake on this answer, so I'm going to give the reason why I'm confused or hesitant. It's like, what's your favorite? For me, if you were to ask me what's your favorite food or music, I'm like, it depends on my mood. I mean, like, it truly, because I got 6-year-old twin girls, so they're always asking me my favorite of everything. So I just pick blue as a color because it just makes them quiet. But with the podcast, I mean, we cover these 5 principles, and it's truly my intellectual sandbox. So like, I had you on there talking about, the do nothing stuff and the meditation and how you found your purpose. And then the next episode, I geek out on valuations and to the nth degree. I'm like, how do you compare those two at all? So I'd say that's why it's so hard. I'd say, man, the easy answer would be you, because you were
Well,
on
I
it.
was hoping you would say that nobody even needed to know I was on, and I highly recommend that's the one you all skip. But I have a favorite, but I don't even know who the person is. I think he was in Texas or something. And
I think that would probably be my favorite one too. I don't know which one you're going to.
He talked about presidents and CEOs and,
Joel Trammell.
Yeah,
and he's down
yeah.
at the Texas CEO or something like that too.
Yeah.
I would actually.
It was one of my favorite episodes of yours. And actually, what was interesting about it, again, another personal story is that it prompted a conversation with, one of our key people at the company. We both listened to it. I listened to it. I ended up listening to it 3 times because I wanted to make sure I digested it all so he and I could have a really rich conversation around it. And at the time I was CEO and he was our president, and our discussion was around, could somebody be president and CEO? And we weren't set up that way. And so that actually became it really opened it helped us see things through a different lens, be open to it. And we made decisions that, because of that podcast episode. So Joel, thank you for that. One of my favorites.
Well, and I appreciate it. So because you answered the question you gave to me, I'll explain why that is one of the top ones that I have, is because that when I was running our family business, or even as we're scaling Arkona, and our team is exponentially growing. And so it's, the challenge is when you are the founder of a company and you don't slide in as the CEO, when you're the founder, is how do you hire a president, or how do you hire a CEO, a CFO, a VP of sales, or a CIO when you've never done that before? So you're going to go hire a $300,000 CFO. I mean, the reason we never had a CFO because we hired the CFOs based on whether we wanted to drink beer and go fishing with them. Don't do that. and the salesperson is always good at selling. And Joel, he said, you hire these functional leaders with their ability to come in, describe to you as the owner what they're planning on doing with their division, and then how they're going to build that plan, and then how they're going to accurately hit that. And it's their degree of accuracy of hitting their own plan. That's how you judge them. It's not whether they're doing virtual servers and going to the cloud, or who cares? It's more of like their ability to understand the business, create a plan, and hold themselves accountable to that own plan. That was the impactful thing in that episode for me.
That was good. Personally, you are somebody that thrives on routine. I know you run 4 or 5 miles every day, like clockwork, 4 miles doesn't matter the weather, doesn't matter anything. He goes out, he does his 4 miles. You have a meditation practice. Transcendental meditation is the kind of meditation that you do. I'm sure you have to do a million other things. Why is routine so important to you? What is that for you? Like, why do you think you need that?
I heard a quote years and years ago that discipline equals freedom. Man, I absolutely believe that from person.
Do you believe that it does?
So I went from this is just a quick story, but in high school, I played soccer year round. I was a soccer captain, all that kind of stuff. And then my parents got a divorce in senior year, and then I went to college for 24 months. I was like, what kind of freedom should a 19 to 20-year-old have? And just everybody that's listening can probably assume the various freedom type of activities that I was pursuing. That kind of chaos with no kind of structure leads to not being happy. Personally, I realize that. And it's more than it comes down to what's the goal? And then hey, there's nothing better than getting done with a successful accomplishment based on the goals that you had set and giving yourself a reward. I always say the 80-20, man. 80% of the time I'm doing all the right things so that way the 20% can be amazing. And it just with the morning routine or even everything else is I can always rest assured that tomorrow morning is going to look exactly like the day before. And even when I broke my leg in half, I was still crutching in and doing the stuff because even if it's barely doing anything, it's still structure that then allows me to think about other things because you were seeing me with my black shirt. You've got your black shirt. I've got 17 of them in my closet and I got 17 gray ones. And same thing with my more professional ones. It's I don't want to have to think about this decision. And I know it's the cliche Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs, but there's some truth underneath that kind of the idolizing that everybody had of that, is you eliminate the decisions of, should I work out tomorrow or not? I mean, Atomic Habits with James Clear, he calls it habit stacking. It just then allows my brain to think about creative things and doing all the stuff that I actually want to do.
Yeah. And you have no problem with creativity and ideas. That's for sure. Okay. I have one last thing for you. Your birthday is 11/21/86. So I just gave your age away if anyone wants to do the math.
35.
Do you know what those numbers mean? Have you ever investigated that or been curious about it?
No, I have not. And I feel like there's something behind this question. So I mean,
no, not at all, other than the answer. If you believe in numerology.
I have zero
but maybe
idea.
You don't, but maybe you have
fun this is just my golden birthday was my 21st birthday. So like, that's all I knew about.
That's all you did. Well, according to the numerology, you're strong and authoritative. And you never doubt rightness, and you act in according to your own desire in each situation.
Well, if my wife was listening in, she'd be like, damn right.
I had a feeling. But you know what I've noticed? Because when I found that out and I went through that
that's funny
exercise, what I know about you is I actually think those qualities do say a bit about who you are. But what I've noticed about you in the short time that I've known you is that you're highly aware of different types of qualities that you have, and you've learned how to manage them in a way that, for example, you act in accordance with your own desire. I don't actually believe that you do that. You might feel in your quick start nature, you want to do that, but you know how to manage that. And I appreciate that, because you are a lifelong learner, and I appreciate that about you.
I appreciate that, Rob. That does mean a lot to me. And I also very much appreciate how you gathered the fact that just because that says that doesn't mean that you act that out. Because like, you're damn right. Like, I absolutely want to do what I want to do, but like, how will that go? I mean, I've done that in the past when I was a kid or in various times. And I can tell you, like, generally, if you just do whatever the heck you want based on emotion, there's going to be probably a pretty negative ripple effect, even if it takes 6 months to see what that negative consequence is. I think people always know that. So the goal is kind of just to manage that. And there's a really interesting quote that I heard recently, where in the Bible, they talk the meek will inherit the earth. And I don't remember what verse that was or anything like that. And actually, if you dive into because that sounds terrible, like, oh, the meek will inherit the earth. Like, well, that's a bunch of people that are just have no spine. They're going to be, walking around on the earth. But if you actually unpack what meek means, it's people that are essentially self-disciplined and have the sword, but they sheath it. And so they have the capability of using that sword, but they don't. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting because like by acknowledging that we're all capable of doing ridiculous stuff, and just acknowledging it, then you can manage to it instead of denying it.
That's right. I love that way to end, Ryan. Those are some wise words. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you to everyone who listens to this podcast. I greatly appreciate your time. I never take it for granted. I hope you enjoyed listening to Ryan. I know I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much, Rob. I appreciate it. Absolutely. We could have done this for hours. I know that.
I know you and I could go on. And to all my listeners, I wish you much love and gratitude.